Welcome to the Rethink Desi Reframe series, where we challenge conventional narratives about social change, sustainability, and the South Asian community. Join me, your host, Arpita Sharma, each week as I have candid conversations with thought leaders, social entrepreneurs, researchers, activists, and creatives as we uncover the strategies, innovations, and stories behind their efforts to reshape our society. Today, we have a special guest in the field of urban planning and data science, Rishabh Singh. Based in Richmond, Virginia, Rishabh serves as a data science analyst at PlanRVA, where he utilizes his extensive knowledge in data analytics to tackle some of the most pressing urban planning challenges. Rishabh's academic background includes a master's degree in city and regional planning from Cornell University and a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Dhanbad. His diverse educational and professional experiences enable him to approach urban sustainability and resilience from a uniquely holistic perspective, integrating the principles of environmental engineering with cutting-edge urban planning strategies. Rishabh's career is marked by a passion for fostering sustainable, resilient urban environments. Today, we are excited to delve into his journey from environmental engineering to data science and urban planning and explore the pivotal moments that have shaped his career. We will also gain insights into his innovative projects at PlanRVA, where data science plays a crucial role in decision-making and urban development. We will specifically talk about the use of AI in urban planning context, the benefits, the challenges, and more. I did a little bit of digging through your LinkedIn, and I found it really interesting that your journey actually started from environmental engineering and then it transitioned to data science and urban planning, which is really quite intriguing to me. And I'd love to know what were some of the pivotal moments or experiences that led you to transition between these two fields?
It has been kind of a focus area for me to develop the career like that. Initially, to take you from the very start, I think I was working as an environmental engineer when I was working at Vedanta. It was a power and manufacturing industry. And so I was in the private space working for an industry. And I could see the technical know-hows. I could understand the technical know-hows, but to be able to have an impact on the social level, say the city level, was something that was missing. And so I went on ahead with, starting an Instagram account, making an education kind of a perspective and education level via Instagram or via other means. But that was not enough. So I was looking at other things, and this intrigued me, the overall environmental cause. And I thought on just an engineering level, we are making an impact by, reducing the pollution that industries create, managing them so that they are within limits. But in the Indian perspective, it has its limits. And I really wanted to go forward with something like city level, planning level thing, so that we can actually impact the lives of people and actually be able to say things on bigger issues like urbanization, sustainable development overall. And to do that, I thought taking an education in urban planning in the US, where people have actually seen these kind of things, people know these difficulties more, these know-hows, and then they are ahead of the curve, and then they can give better learnings to us. So that was something that was in my mind. And so I moved to taking an education in the US at Cornell University. And I did my master's in city and regional planning. And there I finally understood the know-hows of city planning, the know-hows of urban planning, and how looking at things not just from an urban or environmental perspective was required, but also when you think about social lenses, when you think about a city, those things come into a lot of importance, that just looking at, say, an environmental conservation scheme and thinking, oh, yes, reducing pollution is not the only thing that is required. Reading a lot of reports from the UN and others, it was something like we need to have a perspective, a holistic perspective, where we are not just looking at environmental, but we're also looking at the social lens. We are also looking at the economic perspective of, these solutions, and tying it all together to be able to see and to be able to show um, the impact that sustainable development can create. And that all of it tied together was my journey. But at the very end, I somehow got into data analytics because that was the part where, in my education at Cornell, urban planning becomes a little bit abstract, where we are going into the gray area. We are talking about things, but we're not having concrete solutions, or we're not even able to show the problems as such. We show pictures, we show videos, and we know the problems via books, via education. But to showcase that problems to the layman person is something that is not easy. And I thought data analytics, spatial analytics was something that really helped me with it, to be able to say the stories via data, via analytics. And then I thought that, yes, this is something that I need to go forward with. I need to have this skill set. And this is something that puts across all the problems, all my stories in a very clear manner. Data is not biased. Data is not having, say, the author's perspective so much, but data is having the viewer's perspective more, because whatever you're looking at is the actual data, and you can see, oh, that is the problem thing, that is the solution, what can be the right thing to do. So that was my whole journey, how I came from environmental background to going into urban planning, and finally here working with urban analytics to solve complex urban problems.
Are you ready to rethink what it means to be Desi? Follow Rethink Desi on Instagram for inspiring stories, cultural insights, and community that celebrates every facet of South Asian identity. Yeah, that's so interesting. And also coming from a data analytics background myself, it's really, I can say that it can be really powerful when you ask the right types of questions with data, right? You're able to open up new perspectives, new, you know, be able to look at things in a different way that might be able to help people and create innovation in spaces where there hasn't been any. So I'd love to know, in your role at PlanRVA, you leverage this data analytics to address complex urban planning challenges. Can you walk us through maybe a project where data science significantly influenced the decision making process or outcomes?
Right. So data actually comes into a lot of different projects now. We have a dedicated team here at PlanRVA, which is completely called the data team, data and analytics team. And so to take you through a project, I will, before that, tell you about all lots of different projects which go into that project, which finally, creates the decision making step for us. So there are projects like the long range transportation plan, where we actually look at, say, how the development will be in 2050, say 20, 30 years down the line. And that is able to, advise us or guide us over guiding plans to say go forward in a certain manner, so that we are able to see and forecast and not get just shocked by things that are happening, but are able to be going in a certain way which is streamlined. So that was the long range transportation plan. There is another project called the regional indicators that kind of gives us an overview of what the reality is. We develop indicators using census data and other sources to kind of create indicators on education, health, economic, workforce, and transportation, to kind of say show us what the reality is like for our region, and where there are opportunities for development, opportunities for growth, opportunities for social equity. And similar other projects were critical infrastructure mapping, or green infrastructure mapping also, where we are mapping those critical infrastructures which are required, say, in an emergency case basis. These infrastructures have to be very important. So to be able to map that, know that, and bring them along with us on the decision-making platform is something that is really required. We can't just say, look at things just, okay, this is good. We have to have a holistic perspective over when development is happening. It is not, let's say, creating problems for the critical infrastructure. It is not creating problems for the green infrastructure, where, say, a very good aquatic habitat is there, and we are not posing any problems to that habitat. So all of these projects, which are the main projects of any planning agency, they kind of, first of all, they are data driven, and then they all go on to a one really important project, which is the project prioritization, where all the projects that are coming in for approval, the new development projects, they are all getting a score. They are all getting prioritized, and then the top few are the ones that actually go on to get approved. So that is how we are able to say data is able to guide the decision making process, where only those projects which are having a really good score in terms of not having damages, having good development that is needed, and being also attuned to the long range transportation plan or long range regional plan, then we are able to actually go forward with giving an approval for these kind of projects.
Yeah, that's really helpful to understand. And with data, there's all types of data that are available for use in those spaces. So it could range from quantitative data using the census data. It might also rely on qualitative data as well. But your background is specifically, it spans environmental engineering and urban planning. And I'd love to know, how do you integrate principles about these disciplines to approach sustainability and resilience in urban environments?
So as I a little bit touched on before, so the environmental engineering background gives me the technical know-how to understand what the lenses can be to look at environmental conservation or environmental degradation. Say, just to give a few example, PM 2.5, PM 0.5, PM, and different SOx and NOx and air pollutants, water pollutants, how to measure them, and what resources are there to be able to, even show the public that, okay, what is the status right now of the region. So that is something that comes from the environmental engineering background of mine. And urban planning, as I told you before, gives me that lens where this all ties down to the lowest level, and it can't be just a greenwashing of things. It has to be tied down with the economic and social perspectives, so as to be resilient, so as to be sustainable for the longer term. So all of that together kind of helps me guide myself over guiding any plan as to whether this will be something which will be good for people. For example, there can be an environmental conservation plan where we are developing a park, making it really good for people. But if that park really goes well, and that development leads to the housing prices go up in that region, and leads to displacement of people, it does not exactly help the social lens. So to have that whole perspective together actually helps big time, and plan for these solutions to go on and stay for a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's really urban planning, and that social contextual understanding really helps you in terms of thinking analytically, and the technical know-how. You already have that strength, but being able to combine it with that social knowledge can really reshape the way that you are approaching or creating projects. You mentioned, you use a lot of these kind of cutting edge data driven research and analysis in your work. Can you and you also interestingly do a lot of work around applying deep learning and machine learning concepts to drive innovation in regional planning policy projects. So I'd love to. I'm so intrigued by that. I think AI in the space of urban planning comes with its own set of challenges, and I'm sure there's probably some amount of controversy around it. But there's so much also power in being able to utilize algorithms in places that would require a lot more human effort to achieve the same thing.
I'm happy that you put that point here. There are a lot of challenges when trying to put this into the planning perspective, putting the applications of AI and deep learning and machine learning and overall data, cutting edge data driven methods into planning. There are a lot of challenges because say challenges with data, challenges with the accessibility of certain kinds of data that you need. But I think that is exactly where even the solutions pose themselves, because these new AI methods, these new data driven methodologies, they actually pose a solution where for example, now there is text analysis available where we can actually use NLP or natural language processing to analyze texts, and not just one at a time, but to analyze thousands of texts, public comments, or planning documents, to be able to categorize them in a certain way. Okay, say we are using certain kinds of elements more in our planning documents, or some things are missing in those documents. Or when you're looking at community input, you're looking at what community are mostly concerned about, and to put that into categories, say safety, biking, accidents, um, or transportation, or environment. And to put these categories, we can actually show, as a data analyst, I can show where what concerns actually are taking precedence over others, and what the community really wants us to work on, and then to be able to even put them on a map where exactly people are having which problem and where they're having a different problem, and then to guide our solutions according to that. And that is just one example, say NLP, natural language processing. But these tools, the new tools that are coming up, computer vision, and say advanced regression models, these actually help us in going ahead with, say, a better predictive modeling, getting better accuracies, being able to achieve lower standard errors, and to be able to, say, get those techniques in to create better forecasts for the future. And then there are techniques like satellite imagery that we also use to actually be able to get that holistic environmental data that is there for, say, the whole national level, and then to kind of go down from there to your own regional level, and to be able to see, okay, how our region stands, in say in comparison with the whole nation. And then there is a host of data in satellite imagery that is available from back 40 years back, and to be able to use that to be able to see how the development has been over the years, and to track that. So that really helps us. That is just, as the problem exists, that the challenges are there, the solutions also exist, and these new solutions are something that I think data analysts have a responsibility to bring into urban planning. And it is an amazing time to be working in this thing.
Yeah. I think it is a really interesting space. And it's also one I feel like can be often very challenging because, so I took a data analytics course last year, and being able to actually develop these models in a way that is accurate and precise can be really, really challenging. And and
Yeah,
also, like, the data sources that you are using for that can often play a huge role in that process and in developing the accuracy and
true.
training the models. So if you have any kind of experiences with that or any challenges that you face with that, I think this might be a good space to share.
So challenges with training models is something. So I'll just take an example. I was using, say, to advance my NLP model, to also be able to take handwritten comments from people, because we have a lot of in-person events where people are just coming in and we are telling them to, okay, write your review, however you felt about something. So I was trying OCR, which is the, I think, optical character recognition. And I was trying to create a model out of it by training it on, say, the data that we had available to be able to read, public reviews in a better manner, because sometimes they're not, legible. So I was trying to create that. But again, the problems with that are that the data that is available is less. We don't have a host of data. So these training models, they require a lot of data to be able to achieve those accuracies. And so that data is limited, first of all. And then second, the quality of data, say, we need the data to be labeled for training purposes. Say, so to be able to say label 10,000 of comments, that is a challenge in itself. And that is a time taking process where you have to go through that. So what we actually need is label data for these kind of purposes, and that is not available. And I think that also presents an opportunity in itself for someone who is developing that kind of a data um, source to create label data for planning or organizations. That will be amazing, but that is a challenge, and that is a time taking process also, and it just goes on to take a lot of time to achieve that accuracy. But I think it presents a good start in itself, where and some opportunities to even automate some of the scripts so that we can label data using scripts and then use that to train the AI model, which is kind of like a shortcut to it. But if we are able to create good label data, or if we are able to create the historical data that these organizations have already in place, and if possible, if that is labeled as well, then that will be wonderful. So lots of opportunities there, but yes, the challenges are something like that. I think when I'm talking about, say, training the models, this was it. But say choosing the regression models, advanced regression models for predictive modeling, that is something that has to have a lot of challenges with the kinds of data. So every different kinds of data actually go ahead with different types of analysis regression methods. So for one method, decision trees might be useful. For other method, regression, random forest regression might be useful, and so for some, a very simple regression might be useful. And to actually be able to automate these kind of things with AI, that again is a little challenging, because that human input is required in the middle. And I think to be able to show the AI how to think is something that again requires it a lot of data set to be able to reach optimize itself and reach that level of say um, input or decision making, for it to actually be able to be like a human and guide these processes by itself.
There is a lot of discussion around there being kind of, biases within AI, because oftentimes it can be a black box when we're giving the data sources, and then the machine learning models may be interpreting them in certain ways. But there might be biases in the outcomes, or the outputs that the model presents. So I'm just really curious as to, like, have you encountered that, and what does that look like for you?
That is true. That is true. Even at my work, people have actually put this forward, that yes, AI is biased, and there are things like even if you use ChatGPT, something so small, you can see that when you ask it to do a certain task, it goes to a certain solution and it prefers that. So that is the bias that we are talking about. And yes, AI is definitely biased, and that bias, where it comes from, I can also explain that. It comes from the training data. So if we are training it more, say, in one category than the others, and we don't know the categories at all, because what biases it can learn from anything. It can, you're giving it data, say, taking the example, we're giving it data on comments, but we don't know whether legibility can be a bias. People having negative comments can be a bias. People having a certain, say, you know holding themselves back in the comments. That can be a bias that AI can learn very wrongly. And then when we are using it for all the different kinds of applications, it can have that bias going on. So I think, yes, I have firstly come across these kind of biases and challenges, but I think to use AI in this kind of manner that, you know the result, that you need this kind of accuracy, and you know the label data is there where you yourself have labeled, or some authentic source has labeled that, and to make sure that you always keep checking what your AI is achieving, and then to check it on those parameters as well, where you are actually going ahead with checking for biases. You're checking whether it is, what mistakes it is making. So even if you're achieving, say, 90% accuracy, what in that 10% mistakes of the AI, whether it is making one kind of mistake more, whether it is making the other thing, and that is about the mistakes. But even the 90% predictions that it is making right, you have to guide it to say, tell it what is the right thing to do, what is the right application of it, right? So if it is able to say go ahead with predicting what you wanted it to predict, then it is the end game, because then it is right, then it is not biased, and that accuracy in itself will pose a lot of solution. So always going with the training and test validation kind of a methodology, and then rechecking it completely many times, and then also using it for, say, not for all uses and all kind of a thing, but using it in very small levels, where only what is required of you, are you doing it nicely or not, using it like that. I think that is definitely something where we can curb the bias as much as possible. And like, people use ChatGPT for each and everything, that is something that is bound to have bias.
Are you ready to rethink what it means to be Desi? Follow Rethink Desi on Instagram for inspiring stories, cultural insights, and community that celebrates every facet of South Asian identity. ChatGPT might be a really useful tool, but it's not a replacement for having, knowledge of a process or how to actually do something. Because
Yeah,
if ChatGPT makes an error or advises you in a wrong way, then you won't have the tools or the skill set to be able to understand and um, interpret
right,
that. So um,
right,
it's really important, as you're saying, that the person who's utilizing these tools has the skill set and know how to be able to actually use it in a way that that can have a positive impact.
right. Yeah,
Yeah. So I want to touch on a couple of other tools that you also use. So I want to ask, can you share some of the insights into your experience working on projects like scenario planning and travel demand modeling, which people in our audience may not be as familiar with? And how do you use
right.
those projects to contribute to building more efficient and sustainable urban transportation systems?
So first of all, travel demand modeling is a tool, and scenario planning is a project. So travel demand modeling, to start with, is a tool where we use QubeGIS, but there are other softwares as well available to do that. It basically tells you, say, how much load is there on the network of your region, road network, and how many vehicles travel on them, what are different attributes associated with those transport systems, say vehicle miles traveled, which road has traffic, a lot of traffic. So we are able to see from travel demand modeling what exactly how the transportation network of your region is actually going forward with, is actually how it is operating. And then we are able to use that into a lot of different projects. like scenario planning. Scenario planning is basically, to explain it to the layman person, I would use it, or not exactly such a layman person, but a simple data person who knows about standard errors. I would explain it like, whenever there is a forecast, say there is a news channel saying that employment has gone up by 10%. There is a standard error attached to it. It hasn't gone up by exact 10%. It has gone up by, say, 8% to 12%. That is the two region is the standard error. So that is how I explain scenario planning to someone. And it is our, say, effort to create that standard error kind of a thing for planning and development. So whenever there is a policy in place, whenever there is development going on down the lane, 20 years down the line, it might have growth, it might go down. The region itself might be having people coming into it. There can be something changing, and people might be going out of it. So what if we are just planning for growth and growth and growth, and actually the population goes down? So something like that is what scenario planning takes in. And we kind of created different types of scenarios using the long range transportation plan. So we had this plan for 2050 where, the population and employment is, say, looking at a certain level. And then to be able to create that standard error kind of a thing where we are creating scenarios of higher growth than the long range transportation plan, of lower growth than the transportation plan, and then also looking at where the growth is going. So maybe the growth is happening more in the center. Of the urban city, or the growth is moving outward, like the suburbanization. So those were also different scenarios each, and maybe things stayed exactly like, the same way, but there was a reorganization of, say, the population, where population tend to move outward, but there are also people going out. So the population did not increase, but the population moved here and there. So these were 4, 5, 6 scenarios that we kind of develop. And how we develop is something that I can explain you more. We look at population, employment in different traffic analysis zones called TAZs. And we look at them, we use the population and employment, say, numbers to model different kind of outputs, say the energy output, the water output, water consumption output, energy consumption output, the economics of the place, how much cost is there attached to all sorts of different things, say traveling, and other things, how much of health outcomes are there for, say, if there is a reduction in population, then the health outcomes will be different than when there is a growth of population. And then be able to, take this forward a notch to be able to say, okay, if certain things are implemented into one scenario, say we envision a scenario to be, more centric, more transit driven, more bike lanes and things like that, then will the population go down, go up, or not? So doing some things like that with scenario planning, with predictive modeling, that was a very comprehensive project. It has been going on for more than a year, I think, and it involves it involves basic modeling, higher level modeling. We also got consultants to work for us on this, along with us data analysts also working on that. And the whole thing comes together in this way where we are able to show people that, okay, one policy, say transit development, can have so many different different outcomes. It can actually lead to better outcomes, lower costs, better health, and lower energy consumption for the entire region. So to look at these things, we are also able to show the implications of policy, which can be good and can also be bad. So for all the scenarios, different scenarios, say for higher growth of population, how will transit development look like? For lower population, how will transit development look like? So this was something that was scenario planning, and it has so much more. If I keep talking about it, I think I'll take the whole time. But how they guide the sustainable urban transportation system is something exactly like that. They guide our new projects, whatever projects that we are, say, are in pipeline, they are waiting for approval, we are able to see, okay, this is something that aligns with all the scenarios, aligns with our development, aligns with other things. And that is how they guide the new projects. They give them a better score. And we are getting the scenario planning integrated into the project prioritization process as well, and the other projects as well. So that is how it helps us. It helps us understand the risks and foresee shocks that might be, waiting down the line, to not be able to, say later that, okay, we did not foresee this. No, we did plan this, and we might have something in place if something like that happens. So going ahead with that, and also understanding where, say, there is infrastructure lacking, where in all four scenarios something is lacking in one place, and then attach the social equity lens to it, where we are also looking at, okay, so demographics in this place are in a certain manner where we need to work on things. So all of this kind of goes into scenario planning, and it kind of brings in the best out of all of our different projects as well, making those standard errors for different policy programs, different projects, and help us look at not just look at the region not just from a single perspective, but from 4 or 5 different perspectives.
There are situations that do tend to arise. For example, the pandemic, which really very few people would have ever, predicted happening. And do you consider situations like that in that scenario planning process, or even just like dealing with the ramifications of it and decisions that have already been made for the past, because there are so many buildings and so much infrastructure that has been built that, that became underutilized once, once the pandemic happened. And there's been such a change in the way that society is currently operating, even to the point where, there are many different companies and or nonprofits or public entities that are now having employees work from home instead of coming into the office, and those spaces are now very underutilized.
I understood that you will be asking that question, because that is also my first thing that came into my mind when I heard of scenario planning. We're doing scenario planning, but this is more into the realm of long range planning, and it is not taking immediate shocks. It is taking more like, okay, so if COVID-19 makes a place worse, the population goes down there. It is looking at more of the implications of COVID-19, not just immediate shocks. That goes more into the emergency preparedness plan, where, say, a fire happens, a big fire happens, or COVID-19 happens, and things like that. So what emergency preparedness plans are there in place? That is something that goes into that realm. But this is more into, okay, so what different things that we have to change in terms of policy making for the next 30 years. This is something that goes into the scenario planning perspective. It, like, say, as you said, for COVID-19, there are things like people are starting to work from home. So we kind of took that into our perspective in scenario planning, where people in a scenario are actually living not in the center of the city. They're living outside the city, and they're working in the city. So the employment of the city was up, but the population of the out outer areas was up. So to again understand the energy consumption, water consumption, and all the implications of different policies, different say transit development, car development, biking development, these kind of things, going ahead with that kind of a scenario was something that we modeled. Yes, so we did model implications of these kind of things, where health is prioritized. Health is really prioritized, where people are having more hospitals and things like that, but not exactly sudden shocks. That goes into the emergency plan.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're thinking of longer time periods of like maybe 50 years or 100 years. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so that's really valuable to know. And I want to dig into our last question, which I think a lot of folks who are intrigued by this conversation would be interested in. So, given your expertise in spatial analysis, GIS, Python, R, what advice would you give to aspiring data scientists looking to specialize in urban planning and sustainability?
I think I touched on this a little bit, and this is a very intriguing area for me to talk about. Even I think what I see on LinkedIn and across the network when I connect with people is that data scientists are moving fast, very ahead, very fast, and very much ahead. And they go on to think about things like, okay, training the model, getting better accuracies, and focus more on these kind of things. But I think if you have any bit of want to work on the ground, you would definitely want to put applications into your perspective. How am I applying these things, and how am I applying these things for the social level? So looking at applications and looking at applications of AI, as I talked about earlier, that these new solutions also curb the challenges in urban planning, that we have, say, text analysis coming up, we have image analysis coming up, and we have AI automating a lot of tasks that planners had to do for, say, 3 4 days. They're just looking at the network, they're scoring those networks by themselves, looking at things and rating those things only by their own knowledge. Now we can also automate these things. So I think with the development that has already happened and happening at a very fast pace in the data science realm, the applications really are like a gold mine where you can have a lot of good done in terms of social equity, in terms of applications of data science. And I think that is something that people should really focus on, because those are something that even the governments would love help from people. People should also go ahead, if they're not finding jobs, I think people should also go ahead with volunteering for these organizations, because these organizations have to go at a certain pace, because things are on a government level and it is directly involving people, we are impacting people, so we can't really move that fast as data science field in itself is moving. So anyone who is volunteering to work on these kind of things, if you volunteer, I'll tell you the advantages. You will get a host of data to train all your models on, to train, even try to train the model, and that experience in itself will help you a big time. And then to be able to see, okay, I created this model and it helped this project to move fast so much, and that in itself will be such an application for any new upcoming data scientist. That will go a long way, because now you are not just into the academia of it, you're also on ground, you're looking at things. Okay, so data science and these applications, when you're thinking of it, say computer vision, you're looking at it. Okay, so maybe we get photographs of, say, transport network, and we are able to model it to see, to show, say, how many kinds of vehicles exist on the road. Are there more cars, are there more bikes? And then every time you will be going ahead with these applications or techniques, you'll be having things on ground into your mind, and that is a better perspective to have, I think, than just going with the say the optimization modeling in my.
Yeah, thank you. That I think that's very powerful, because oftentimes when you are in those environments, a lot of it is about making the model fit correctly, but without contextual understanding of the sources that you're utilizing and really what sources may be lacking. It can be really difficult to create models that can be effective.
Right, exactly. I think it goes on to be like a process where you do something and you again go back to refining it. It has to be a process of keep on refining it again and again and again and again, and only by doing an applying these things on the ground, you will understand what problems are coming out of it. Because on paper you're thinking, oh, my model is so good, but why is it not giving better results? But when you'll see that on ground, okay, there is a problem coming out of it that we hadn't looked. So when you apply things like that on the ground, and especially in urban planning, where there is a host of opportunity, as I said, there might not be so much opportunity elsewhere, but there is a ton of opportunity here with the kind of data available, with the kind of say historical data available, with these agencies, and they will always welcome you with open arms, because we are working to make people's lives better, and we would love to have expertise in our organizations. And so looking at things from that perspective, I think will definitely help any upcoming data scientist.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the Reframe series. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Stay connected with us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Rethink Desi for the latest updates. And if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, become a sponsor, or join the Rethink Desi directory, visit rethinkdesi.org and fill out our form. We look forward to hearing from you. So I'm excited to give you an exclusive sneak peek into our upcoming episode of the Reframe series. In this space, we have Sasha Sabharwal, who is an interdisciplinary scholar of the South Asian diaspora with research interests in critical ethnic studies, the racialization of religion, transnational gender and sexuality studies, and the intersections of caste and race. She's currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for the Humanities at Tufts University. In fall 2023, she will begin as assistant professor of cultural anthropology and Asian studies at Northeastern University. She holds a PhD from Yale University in the Department of American Studies with a certificate in women's gender and sexuality studies. Dr. Sabharwal's research examines caste and gender hierarchies in the Sikh diaspora of the Pacific Northwest. Her research offers an analysis of race, gender, and religion within a transnational community in the Western Borderland region of the Pacific Northwest to highlight the diversity of caste, not just within Hindu diasporic communities, but its ubiquity across South Asian religions. So join us as we learn from these changemakers and explore new ways to create meaningful social impact. It's really nice to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Arpita. It's so wonderful to be here and so exciting to see this sort of format for a podcast on rethinking Desi, a term that sort of has become popularized through representation and across many conversations about South Asian diaspora, including conversations with Kamala Harris. So it's really wonderful to see the work you're doing in sort of allowing for folks to see the heterogeneity of the term Desi and sort of what it might mean to politically align ourselves as Desi.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So excited to have you here. Could you tell us a bit about your background and what inspired you to focus on researching caste and diaspora communities?
I grew up in Orange County, California. As folks might know, the South Asian diaspora in Southern California is quite sparse in that folks are sort of geographically scattered across different towns in Southern California. And so the diaspora compositions are quite different than other places, including places that I've done my research. And I grew up in a Punjabi, Hindu, and Sikh household. And my parents were owners of a liquor store. And so my sister and I participated in local South Asian family gatherings and programs at temples and gurdwaras, but we felt like it was mostly just us. So we felt very much sort of integrated into other ethnic communities, including the Latinx community that was predominant where we lived in Fullerton, California. And so that was my experience sort of growing up in this kind of ethnic background, growing up and going to Artesia for food and for shopping was an important part of our upbringing. And then I went on to get my undergrad bachelor's degree in gender and sexuality studies at UC Irvine. And it was there that I sort of learned the importance of feminist theory and gender and sexuality studies in terms of my own relationship to the world. And it really motivated me to become an academic. And so I decided to get my PhD, and I moved to New Haven, Connecticut, to do a doctoral degree at Yale in the Department of American Studies, where I had the privilege of working with my advisor, Inderpal Graywal, who is sort of one of the founders of this framework and methodology of transnational feminism. And she was a really powerful influence in my own relationship to my work and to mentorship and to community engagement. And so she really sort of helped me to think about the project that I am currently working on. And I'll say a little bit about that, and we can get more into that later. But I actually moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, to do a very different project than the one that I have completed. And so I went to Vancouver with this idea, having grown up in Southern California, to work on religion and what I was conceptualizing as transnational religion in Punjab, which is a site that was so affected by histories of colonialism and histories of partition. And I was thinking about this idea that academics have theorized called syncretism. So, this notion of, we have in Punjab, there are Muslims, there are Sikhs, there are Hindus, and thinking about the overlapping ways in which folks in Punjab are practicing religion. So, I was curious in my original prospectus and my original research plan to kind of go into Vancouver and see what does religion actually look like in the diaspora, and how does religion get practiced? Are there folks that go to, for instance, like Sufi shrines and dargahs? Are there folks that also go to like Hindu mandirs and folks that go to the Gurdwara? And when I get to Vancouver, it turns out that no one is really interested in that project. And in fact, I would sort of have preliminary conversations with folks that later went on to be important interlocutors. And I mean, the conversations really went nowhere. They were really sort of, there was a standstill. And instead, what was happening, and I was there in Vancouver in 2019, was that folks were really interested in conversations about caste. And so that really became the forefront of, what organizing looked like, sort of what community participation looked like. It was really a kind of center of the conversation. And so my project just completely shifted. And I think this is something that I learned from Inderpal, which is like, lots of times you can go into the communities that you want to work with and work in, and you can impose a kind of sort of like question and a kind of framework and a kind of like way of thinking and epistemology. But it's important to sort of pay attention and listen to what's actually happening on the ground and the kind of conversations that matter to the community in that moment. And so I think that was important for me to sort of pivot and really, I really felt like privileged to be there at that time where the conversations were happening so much more so than in the past, even though this isn't a new thing by any means, but it was sort of incredible to kind of be there at the right time, in the right place, kind of talking to the right people, to really kind of be in the heart of things.
Are you ready to rethink what it means to be Desi? Follow Rethink Desi on Instagram for inspiring stories, cultural insights, and community that celebrates every facet of South Asian identity.